The biggest predator on Earth can hold its breath for 90 minutes, dive 2 miles deep, and produce a sound louder than a jet engine. It has the largest brain of any animal that has ever lived. Its jaws are lined with 8-inch teeth, and it has never once hunted a human. We killed over 1 million of them. They let us. And today, when divers slip into the water beside them, these animals circle slowly, scan them with sound, and swim away. No attack, no revenge, just curiosity. We're going to find out why. We'll go inside their language, their families, their wars with giant squid, and the one famous attack that wasn't what it looked like. If you enjoy this journey, drop a like and subscribe. Prepare yourselves. We begin. Picture a city bus. Now make it longer. Now give it teeth the size of water bottles and a head the size of a pickup truck. That is a sperm whale, and it is looking right at you. A fully grown male stretches around 60 feet long. That is longer than a school bus. It weighs as much as 8 elephants packed together. Its lower jaw carries 20 to 26 teeth, each one up to 8 inches long and shaped like a thick cone. One swipe of its tail can flip a small boat clean out of the water. The tail span alone spreads about 14 feet across, wider than most living rooms. Each individual tooth can weigh as much as 2 pounds. So let's get the numbers clear. The sperm whale is the largest predator with teeth on Earth. Every other animal with a bite, a claw, or a sting plays second place. There is nothing alive today that competes with it at the top of the toothed predator chart. And yet, in all of recorded human history, a sperm whale has never once hunted a person. You could swim up to one right now in the open ocean. Plenty of people do. Scientists, divers, filmmakers. They slip into the water off the coast of Dominica, a small island in the Caribbean, and they float there while animals the size of a city bus glide past them. The whale turns its enormous head. It clicks once or twice. It stares with a small, steady eye. Then it swims away. No bite, no charge, no chase. Every large predator on Earth has a history of hunting humans at least once. Lions do it. Crocodiles do it. Even hippos, which eat grass, kill around 500 people every year. Great white sharks, which are a fraction of a sperm whale's size and power, have attacked humans in the shallows hundreds of documented times. But the sperm whale, the single most physically powerful predator alive, has kept a perfect record. 0 hunts, 0 kills. Across the entire history of human civilization. That is strange. And science has spent decades trying to figure out why. Part of the answer lives in what sperm whales eat. Their diet runs so deep underwater, so far from anything human, that we never cross their path as prey. They spend most of their lives in the dark, chasing animals that live 2 miles below the surface. We don't go there, we can't. But that explanation only gets you halfway. Because sperm whales also have the memory and the brain power to hold a grudge. We did terrible things to them. For 200 years we hunted them in their own ocean. We stabbed them with harpoons. We burned their bodies for oil. We nearly wiped them out completely. We killed over 1 million of them, and they still didn't come for us. That takes a certain kind of mind. The sperm whale's mind is something that will seriously change how you think about intelligence, family, and what it means to choose peace. Because that choice, if it really is a choice, starts with a body so extreme it almost defies belief. And the first thing you notice, when you see one up close for the very first time, is that it looks almost nothing like what you imagined. Most people picture a whale as a smooth, dark shape curving through blue water. A sperm whale looks nothing like that. Its head is a rectangular block, flat at the front, square, like someone glued a giant box onto the body of a regular whale. That head makes up about 1/3 of the animal's total length. On a 60-foot male, that is 20 feet of solid head. Imagine stacking 4 tall adults on top of each other and telling them they are now someone's face. The skin is dark grey and wrinkled. Up close it looks tough and leathery, like old rubber left in the sun. The wrinkles run in deep folds across the back and sides. Scientists can identify individual whales by their unique skin patterns, the same way you might recognize someone by a scar on their hand. Every animal has a distinct look. Once you know one whale, you know it for life. The blowhole sits on the left side of the head, shifted off-center. Every other whale has theirs in the middle. The sperm whale is the only large whale built this way. When it surfaces, the spray shoots forward and slightly to the left, so sailors learn to spot one from miles away, just by watching the angle of the mist rising off the ocean. The eyes are tiny for the animal's size. They sit far back on the head, almost at the corners, giving the whale a wide field of view on both sides. But since the block-shaped head sticks so far forward, a sperm whale looking straight ahead can barely see what is directly in front of it. It relies almost entirely on sound for that, and the sound it makes is extraordinary, which we will get to soon. The body behind the head tapers into a long, muscular trunk. The dorsal fin, the one on top, is more of a low bump than a tall point. Then come the flukes, the two wide lobes of the tail, each one spreading maybe 14 feet from tip to tip on a large male. One sweep of those flukes pushes 10 tons of water behind it and launches the animal forward like a torpedo. When a sperm whale swims toward you underwater, the experience is hard to describe. The head arrives first. It fills your entire field of vision. Then the rest of the body just keeps coming and coming. The animal moves slowly, almost relaxed, but covering huge distance with every push of its tail. Researchers who have been in the water with them describe the same reaction every time. You feel small in a way you have never felt before. Your whole understanding of what a large animal is gets reset in about 5 seconds. One scientist floating off Dominica said the whale turned its head toward her and held eye contact for almost a full minute. The eye was calm, steady, looking at her with what she could only describe as patience. Then the whale rolled slightly, redirected its body, and sank back into the blue. Gone in seconds. The animal that just made eye contact with her weighs 50 tons. She weighed less than the whale's lower jaw. She survived with a story she still tells. The whale went back to its own world, and its world starts with something inside that enormous head that no other animal on Earth has ever developed. Pick up your phone, hold it in your hand. Your brain is roughly the size of both your fists pressed together. It weighs about 3 pounds. A sperm whale's brain weighs 17 pounds. That is 6 times heavier than yours. It is the largest brain that any animal has ever grown in the entire history of life on Earth. Bigger than a blue whale's brain. Bigger than an elephant's. Bigger than anything that ever walked, swam, or flew. And it sits inside that rectangular block of a head, surrounded by oil and muscle, running constantly. Now, here is where it gets complicated. Big brain does not always mean more intelligent. Elephants have large brains and they are clearly very intelligent. But some animals have large brains mostly because they need the computing power to run a large body, managing muscles and organs across a huge frame. Scientists use a measurement called the brain-to-body ratio to sort this out, and by that measure, sperm whales fall behind dolphins and even behind humans. But the structure of the brain tells a different story. Sperm whales have something called spindle neurons. These are the specific brain cells that handle complex thinking, deeper thought, social reasoning, memory, the ability to feel something for someone else. Humans have them, dolphins have them, sperm whales have them too. Scientists only confirmed this in the last couple of decades, and it changed how the field thought about these animals overnight. The folding on a sperm whale's brain is extreme. The more a brain folds, the more surface area it has packed into a smaller space. More surface area usually means more processing power. A sperm whale's brain folds far more than most mammals, so while its ratio to body size is lower than a human's, the raw structure suggests a level of processing that scientists are still trying to fully map. What does all that brain power actually do? Part of it manages the body. Sperm whales do physically demanding things, like diving thousands of feet into crushing pressure, then resurfacing without damage. That takes serious biological control. But a large portion of that brain handles something else entirely, Relationships. Sperm whales are intensely social. They form tight family groups. They remember each other as individuals. They teach skills to younger whales. They grieve. Scientists have watched sperm whale pods stay with a dead calf for hours, circling, touching it, refusing to leave. The behaviour mirrors what elephant herds do, and elephants are already considered among the most emotionally complex animals alive. One research team, studying the same group of whales over many years in the Caribbean, found that certain females kept specific social roles within the group for their entire lives. One whale always babysat, one always led the group to feeding areas. The knowledge those whales carried lived inside that 17-pound brain, and the knowledge passed on, to daughters, to nieces, across generations. A sperm whale alive today might carry skills and memories passed down from a grandmother who was alive before anyone alive right now was born. That is a mind doing something beyond just managing a body. That is a mind holding a culture together. And cultures need a language to survive. Sperm whales have one. It runs entirely on sound. And the first time scientists heard it clearly, it stopped them cold. Every family has a structure. Who is in charge? Who takes care of the babies? Who makes the big decisions? In a sperm whale family, those roles are all held by females. A typical sperm whale group is made up of adult females and their young. Around 6 to 12 animals at most. They travel together, eat together, sleep near each other, and raise their calves as a team. The males leave when they hit adolescence, around 10 years old, and spend most of their adult lives alone or in loose groups with other males far away in colder waters. Scientists call the female groups units. Each unit stays together for life. A female born into one group will almost certainly die in the same group decades later. She will know every animal around her by sound before she can even see them clearly. These groups are matrilineal, which means they are organised around the female bloodline. A grandmother, her daughters, her daughter's daughters. Think of it like a family that never splits up, where the oldest females carry the most knowledge and the youngest females are being trained constantly, just by watching. The oldest female in a group is often the most critical animal. She has lived the longest. She knows where the best feeding grounds are during each season. She knows the safest routes. She knows which areas to avoid and which sounds mean danger is close. When something goes wrong, the younger females watch her. Researchers studying sperm whales in the Pacific found something specific about these older females. Groups with older, more experienced leaders had calves that survived at higher rates. The knowledge the elder carried translated directly into survival for the whole group. Remove the elder and the group's success drops. One team followed a specific unit for over 15 years. The eldest female was probably in her 50s. She had grandchildren swimming next to her. Scientists gave the group a name, watched the births, tracked the deaths, and mapped the social connections between every individual. What they found looked a lot like an extended human family, just spread across miles of open ocean instead of a neighbourhood. But there is a detail that makes sperm whale families even more fascinating. The males who leave at adolescence do return. They come back to the warm waters where the females live when it's time to breed. And during those visits, something unusual happens. The returning males move carefully. They do not disrupt the group structure. They stay at the edges. They seem to know the rules and follow them. One researcher described watching a large male, probably 40 years old, approaching a female group he had likely left as a teenager. The females surrounded him briefly. Clicks were exchanged. Then the group carried on normally. The male stayed at the edges, existing alongside them without asserting himself over anyone. That kind of behaviour in a large, powerful animal points to something serious happening inside the brain. These animals understand their social place. They know the rules. They follow them. Which brings us to the most important job in the whole group, keeping the calves alive while their mothers hunt. Because a mother sperm whale has to dive deep for food, she is gone for up to an hour, and she cannot take her baby with her. A baby sperm whale cannot dive. When it is born, it has soft, flexible fins and lungs that have never been used. It weighs around a ton, but it is essentially helpless in the open ocean. It cannot follow its mother into the deep, it cannot hunt, and it cannot survive alone at the surface for 45 minutes while she chases squid 2 miles down. So the pod solves this problem the same way humans solved childcare before schools existed. Everyone helps. When a mother prepares to dive, something specific happens. She moves toward another adult female. The calf transfers. The shift happens without drama, without a visible signal we can always detect, but the change is real. The calf moves toward the new adult. The mother goes vertical and disappears into the darkness below. Now, a different female is responsible for that calf. She keeps it at the surface. She watches for threats. She stays calm so the calf stays calm. And sometimes she nurses it, even though it is not her own. Researchers have confirmed that female sperm whales nurse other females' calves regularly. Scientists call this allonursing, and it means a sperm whale calf might drink milk from 3 or 4 different adults before it is old enough to feed itself. The calf gets nutrition and care from the whole group, not just its mother. When the mother comes back up from her dive, the calf returns to her. The handoff completes. A few minutes later, it might happen again. One team off the coast of the Caribbean spent months following a single unit and tracking every calf interaction they could observe. They found that calves were passed between adults hundreds of times over the course of a few weeks. The system was constant, seamless. No calf spent significant time at the surface without an adult nearby. Juvenile females too young to have their own calves also joined in. They would swim alongside a calf for stretches, keeping watch, staying close. Researchers describe this as apprenticeship. Young females were practicing caregiving years before they ever needed it for their own offspring. In 2026, a research team captured footage of something never recorded before. 2 separate pods came together at the surface. A female in one pod had just given birth. The calf was struggling to stay above water. Newborn sperm whales can actually sink if no one supports them. The calf's own pods surrounded it immediately, forming a raft of bodies underneath it. But then the second, completely unrelated pod joined in. Animals with no genetic connection to the calf pushed it toward the surface alongside strangers. The calf survived. That moment is one of the most striking things ever filmed in whale research. 2 separate families, different dialects, different social histories, cooperating to keep one newborn alive. No signal that anyone could detect, just a group of animals that saw a calf struggling and moved toward it. All of this caregiving, the nursing, the handoffs, the cross-family rescue, happens without any written rules. It lives inside the culture of the group, passed from old females to young ones, encoded in behaviour rather than biology. Which raises a serious question. If sperm whales can hold this kind of culture across generations, what else are they passing down? The answer lives in sound, a very specific kind of sound. And what scientists found inside it will completely change how you think about animal communication. 2 miles underwater, there is no light. None. The sun stops reaching that deep. The water is close to freezing. The pressure would kill a human in seconds. For a sperm whale hunting in complete darkness, there is only one tool that works: sound. Sperm whales make clicks, short, sharp bursts of sound produced in the massive structure inside their head. Each click lasts less than a millisecond. They fire them in rapid sequences, sometimes dozens per second. The clicks travel through the dark water, bounce off objects, and return as echoes. The whale reads those echoes and builds a picture of everything around it. A squid 50 feet away. A school of fish. The ocean floor far below. All of it mapped in total darkness through sound alone. This is echolocation, and sperm whales do it better than almost any animal alive. Their clicks can travel for miles. Scientists have measured them at over 230 decibels. That makes them the loudest sounds produced by any animal on Earth. A jet engine at takeoff hits around 140 decibels. A sperm whale click is louder. enormously louder. But hunting clicks are only one kind of sound. When sperm whales are with each other, socializing at the surface after a dive, they produce a completely different type of click. Scientists call these codas, and codas appear to be a language. A coda is a short pattern of clicks, maybe 5 clicks, then a pause, then 2 more, or 3 clicks close together, then 1 click after a delay. Each pattern is distinct, repeatable, recognized by other whales. A research team studying sperm whale codas off Dominica found that individual whales have their own signature codas. They use these to identify themselves. When 2 whales meet, they exchange codas at the surface, and the exchange appears to carry information. Who you are, which family you belong to, possibly more. The system works in darkness, at depth, across miles of open ocean. A whale can hear a family member's coda from far away and know who is calling. Scientists have documented long coda exchanges that go back and forth between 2 whales, one clicking, the other responding, with built-in pauses like a conversation. In 2025, a team of researchers made a discovery that genuinely stunned the field. Sperm whales do not just use click patterns. They modulate the frequency of those clicks in a way that creates something similar to vowel sounds, like the difference between saying R and E, 2 distinct phonetic elements layered inside the same click system. The researchers described it as an underwater phonetic alphabet, a building block for complex communication, something that, in structure, starts to resemble the foundations of speech. Scientists are careful to say they cannot yet translate a coda. They do not know what any specific exchange means, but the structure of the system, the patterns, the back and forth, the individual signatures, the vowel-like elements, suggest communication more complex than anything researchers expected. And it gets stranger, because different families of sperm whales do not speak the same dialect. The same species, living in the same ocean, using different versions of the same click system. The difference is cultural, and it goes back generations. Imagine you moved to a new city and everyone there spoke English, but slightly differently. Same words, different rhythm, longer pauses in different places, a slightly faster pace on certain phrases. You would recognize the language immediately, but something would feel off. That is exactly what happens between sperm whale clans. A clan is a group of sperm whale families spread across a large area of ocean that all share the same dialect of codas. All the females and calves in one clan produce codas in a specific recognizable style. A different clan, even one living in the same ocean, produces their codas differently. The number of clicks, the timing between them, the overall rhythm, all subtly distinct. Scientists studying sperm whales in the Pacific identified multiple clans sharing the same water. When 2 families from different clans met, they were civil but did not fully mix. When 2 families from the same clan met, they actively socialized, spending more time together, exchanging codas, behaving like relatives. The dialect was a signal. It said, "We are the same kind. The clans are enormous." A single Pacific clan might span thousands of miles. Families that have never directly met still share the same coda style because they all learned it from their mothers, who learned it from theirs, going back many generations. The dialect travels through time inside female bloodlines. In 2026, a team of scientists published a study about sperm whales in the Mediterranean Sea, a population that has been isolated from the rest of the world's sperm whales for a very long time. They had been recording these whales for 2 decades, and in those recordings, they found something that had never been caught before in any animal. 2 groups of Mediterranean sperm whales were developing different dialects in real time. Whales near the Hellenic Trench, a deep underwater canyon near the island of Crete, had started producing a faster version of the standard coda. Whales to the west still use the slower original. The researchers confirmed it across years of recordings. A dialect was splitting into 2. 2 groups who likely shared ancestors were developing separate vocal traditions right now while scientists were watching. One scientist on the team put it simply: while human civilizations around the Mediterranean were building languages, art, and identity, sperm whales were doing the same thing in the water underneath them. That is cultural evolution. The same process that made French and Spanish different from each other, even though they share a common root, happening in whale cliques in the open ocean across decades. And the whales on the edge of the change remembered both versions. On certain days, the whales near the Hellenic Trench switched back to the older, slower coda style. Researchers called these throwback days. The whales had not replaced the original. They carried both dialects. They chose which one to use. Holding an old cultural form while also adopting a new one requires memory that spans years. It requires the ability to hold two versions of the same thing and switch between them. In humans, we would call that bilingualism, a whale carrying its grandmother's dialect, choosing when to use it. That is not animal behavior in the way we usually talk about it. And scientists found that the cliques themselves hold even more internal structure than anyone expected. Something that will seriously surprise you about how these animals build meaning inside a single sound. In 2024, a team of researchers sat down with years of sperm whale recordings and ran them through analysis software that could measure the tiniest shifts in frequency inside each click. They were looking for patterns they might have missed. What they found changed the entire picture. Buried inside the click patterns, in the way the frequency rose and fell within a single coda, were two distinct phonetic shapes. One followed a rising arc of sound, similar in structure to the vowel R. The other followed a falling arc, closer in structure to E. The whales were adjusting the pitch curve inside their clicks in consistent, repeatable ways across many individuals. The team called these coda vowels, and they showed that individual whales used these vowels differently. Some preferred one over the other depending on context. The vowels appeared in structured combinations. One whale would produce a coda with a rising curve, the other would respond with a falling one. The exchange had shape, it had variation, it had the internal structure of something linguistic. One of the lead researchers described what used to look like alien Morse code as suddenly looking genuinely human-like. An underwater phonetic system. Whales controlling the frequency arc inside their clicks to add a new layer of meaning on top of the click pattern itself. The project behind this discovery is called Project CETI, which stands for Cetacean Translation Initiative. Their goal is to record enough sperm whale communication to feed it into artificial intelligence models and begin translating it. They have deployed underwater microphones across the Caribbean, recording codas from multiple pods across multiple years. The dataset they are building is unlike anything previously attempted for any animal. That goal sounds impossible. The researchers themselves are careful not to overpromise. They do not know yet if sperm whale communication reaches the complexity of human language. They cannot translate a coda the way you might translate a word. But the structure they are finding, the patterns, the vowels, the back and forth exchanges, suggests that these clicks carry far more information than a simple greeting or an identity signal. To understand why this matters, think about how much humans communicate through tone. You can say the word fine in 10 different ways and mean 10 different things. The word is the same, the meaning shifts with the sound. Sperm whales might be doing something similar. The click pattern gives a base meaning. The vowel-like frequency shifts layer something on top of it. Maybe emotion, maybe urgency, maybe relationship status. Scientists genuinely do not know yet, and admitting that is part of what makes the field exciting right now. What they do know is that sperm whales do not come pre-programmed with this ability. They learn it. Calves spend years listening to adults before their own codas stabilize into a consistent personal style. Young whales produce sloppy, inconsistent versions of adult codas, slowly sharpening over time, matching the style of the family around them. That process of learning to produce specific sounds by listening to a social group is called vocal learning. It is one of the rarest abilities in the animal world. Humans do it. Songbirds do it. Bats do it. Sperm whales do it too. An animal that learns its language from the family around it. That picks up dialects. that modulates vowel-like sounds within structured patterns. You start to wonder how much is going on inside that 17-pound brain every day. The answer lives inside the most unusual organ any animal has ever built, and it is sitting right there inside that enormous square head. There is a reason a sperm whale's head is shaped like a box. Something is inside it, something massive, an organ that takes up around 1/3 of the animal's entire body length and holds up to 500 gallons of a specialized waxy oil. Scientists call it the spermaceti organ. It is named after the oil inside it, which whalers in the 1800s mistook for something it was not. That misidentification is why the whale has its name. The oil is a clear, waxy liquid that hardens slightly when cooled and flows more freely when warm. That temperature-sensitive property turns out to be central to almost everything this organ does. The spermaceti organ sits on top of the whale's nasal passages, which run through the head in a complex system of chambers, air sacs and tunnels. When the whale makes a click, it forces air through a tiny pair of flaps at the very front of the nose. The sound travels backward through the entire length of the organ, bounces off an air sac at the back of the skull, then gets redirected forward through a dense fatty structure below called the junk. The junk focuses the sound into a tight beam and fires it forward into the ocean ahead of the whale. The result is one of the most precise natural sonar systems ever studied. The whale can aim its clicks like a spotlight in total darkness. It can detect a squid the size of a golden retriever from hundreds of feet away without any light at all. And because the beam is focused rather than scattered, it delivers a powerful, targeted pulse of acoustic energy to a specific point in front of the whale. But there may be a second function, and it is one scientists still debate. Some researchers believe the spermaceti organ also helps the whale manage its buoyancy underwater. The oil is temperature sensitive. When warm, it is less dense. When cooled, it becomes denser and heavier. The hypothesis is that the whale can cool the organ during a deep dive by drawing cold seawater through nasal passages surrounding it, making the head heavier and helping the whale sink with less effort. On the way up, the organ warms again, helping the whale rise. Other scientists argue the effect would be too small to matter at the depths these animals reach. They point out that maintaining the temperature exchange at great depth would require effort the whale probably cannot afford during a hunt. The debate continues. What everyone agrees on is this: the spermaceti organ is the reason sperm whales can do something no other warm-blooded animal can match. Dive 2 miles below the surface, stay down for 90 minutes, come back up undamaged, and hunt using sound in a place no light has ever reached. 500 gallons of specialized oil packed into a box-shaped head. Firing sound like a precision instrument. Possibly trimming depth like a submarine's ballast system. This is what millions of years of hunting in total darkness built. And the world at the bottom of that dive is a place that would terrify almost any predator on Earth. Extreme pressure, zero visibility, and prey that fights back harder than almost anything else alive. What the whale's body does to survive that environment goes even further than the organ in its head. Take the Empire State Building, stack another one on top of it, then stack a third. Now place all three end-to-end going straight down below the ocean surface. That is roughly how deep a sperm whale regularly goes to hunt. 2 miles straight down, sometimes deeper. A single dive takes around 45 minutes to reach hunting depth. The whale hunts in total darkness for a while, then it swims all the way back up. Total time underwater, up to 90 minutes, and then it does it again. All day, every day. Dozens of dives per 24 hours for the entire adult life of the animal. Your lungs start panicking after about 2 minutes without air. A sperm whale handles 90 minutes dozens of times every single day for decades. The first problem is oxygen. A sperm whale does not carry more air than you would. Its lungs are not especially large relative to its size, but its blood and muscles store oxygen in a completely different way. Sperm whale blood is packed with a protein called myoglobin, which locks oxygen directly into muscle tissue rather than just carrying it through the blood. This is why sperm whale meat appears almost black when exposed. The myoglobin content is so high that it darkens the flesh permanently. During a deep dive, those oxygen-loaded muscles release their reserves slowly and steadily, giving the whale a supply that lasts far longer than a simple breath could account for. The second problem is pressure. At 2 miles deep, the ocean presses in on every surface of a body with a force that would collapse a human chest like a paper cup. A sperm whale's chest wall is flexible. Its ribs attach loosely to the spine and fold inward as external pressure builds. The lungs compress to nearly nothing. This sounds alarming, but it is exactly the right design. Rigid lungs at that depth would trap compressed gases in the bloodstream and cause severe damage on the way back up. Collapsible lungs mean the whale carries almost no pressurized air once it reaches depth, eliminating the problem entirely. The third problem is blood chemistry. Under extreme pressure, nitrogen dissolves into the bloodstream and can cause what human divers call the bends when pressure drops too quickly. Sperm whales handle this by shifting circulation during the dive. Blood gets redirected away from the limbs and outer body. It concentrates around the brain, heart, and central nervous system. The whale powers down everything except the systems that keep it alive, running those critical systems on a carefully rationed minimum. Scientists attach small suction cup recording devices to sperm whales to track exactly what happens during a dive. The data was striking. The whale descends quickly, levels off at hunting depth, goes nearly silent for an extended period, then produces a burst of rapid echolocation clicks that speed up as it closes on prey, then silence again, then a long ascent. The pattern matches a stalking predator, moving quietly through darkness, locking on, closing fast, a 2-mile descent without air, 90 minutes, hunting by sound alone, and what waits at the bottom of that dive is an animal that many scientists spent over a century believing might not even exist. Most submarines have an operational depth limit. Go deeper than the hull was engineered to handle, and the pressure outside exceeds what the metal can take. The walls give way. Every military and research submarine ever built has a maximum depth beyond which the hull cannot survive. A sperm whale has no depth limit that anyone has ever found. The deepest confirmed dive ever tracked with acoustic recording equipment reached around 7,000 feet. That is well over a mile straight down. But scientists believe sperm whales regularly go deeper, and some indirect evidence points to individual dives nearing 10,000 feet when pursuing particularly fast or deep prey. At that depth, the pressure is roughly 300 times greater than the pressure at the surface where you're sitting right now. Every square inch of the whale's body takes 300 times the force it experiences at the surface. Submarines are built from high-strength steel plates and engineered to very specific tolerances. A sperm whale is built from tissue, blood, and bone, and the biological solution holds up under pressure that would reduce the steel to scrap. The first solution is architectural. A sperm whale's rib cage is designed to compress under load, not resist it. The ribs attach loosely to the spine. As external pressure builds during a dive, the rib cage folds inward and the lungs collapse to a fraction of their normal volume. This seems alarming, but it is exactly the right design. Rigid, air-filled lungs at depth would force nitrogen into the bloodstream and cause disaster on the way back up. Collapsible lungs carry almost no pressurized gas by the time the whale reaches hunting depth, eliminating the problem at the source. The second solution is circulatory. When a sperm whale begins a serious dive, something called the diving response kicks in automatically. The heart rate slows significantly. Blood vessels in the skin, limbs, and outer muscle constrict, cutting those areas out of the blood loop almost entirely. Blood concentrates at the brain, heart, and essential organs. The whale shuts down its outer systems and protects its core, keeping the critical machinery running while everything else runs on minimum. The third solution involves a dense network of specialized blood vessels woven throughout the body. These networks act as biological pressure buffers and oxygen banks, storing oxygen from the blood during descent and releasing it gradually during the hunt. Engineers would call them a reservoir system. Biologists call them the rete mirabile, which translates roughly to wonderful net. That name was given by scientists who found them and were genuinely impressed. Here is what makes engineers studying this genuinely frustrated. The sperm whale manages all of these adaptations automatically. No conscious adjustment, no instruments. The moment the whale tilts vertical and begins its descent, the body transitions to deep dive mode on its own. No crew required. Researchers have written papers describing sperm whale diving physiology as a reference model for underwater vehicle design. The biological solutions to pressure, oxygen management and buoyancy these animals evolved over millions of years are solutions human engineers are still working toward with metal and computer systems. A body that folds safely under crushing force, powers down to minimum, hunts precisely in the dark, and returns to the surface undamaged. Dozens of times per day. For decades. And each return trip brings up evidence of what happened down there. Written in permanent scars on the skin, left by something that fought back hard. For a long time, scientists were not sure giant squid were real. Sailors had been telling stories about them for centuries. Tentacled monsters large enough to drag ships underwater, kraken, sea devils, descriptions that blended terror, imagination, and too many months at sea all into one. Then sperm whale stomachs started telling the truth. When researchers examined the stomach contents of dead sperm whales, they found beaks, hundreds of them, sometimes thousands packed into a single stomach, sharp, curved, hard structures that belonged to one animal only, squid. And the largest beaks came from something enormous that almost no one had ever seen alive. Giant squid can grow up to 45 feet long. 45 feet. That is roughly the length of a school bus. They have eyes the size of basketballs. Those are the largest eyes of any living animal on Earth, designed to collect the faintest traces of bioluminescent light in the deep ocean. Their 8 arms are lined with suckers, and those suckers are not smooth. Each one is edged with small, sharp, rotating hooks built to lock onto prey and hold it against any amount of force trying to pull away. When a sperm whale dives to hunting depth and locks its echolocation onto a giant squid, what follows is a battle no human has ever directly witnessed. The ocean is too deep, the darkness is absolute, but the evidence comes back up with the whale, written permanently in its skin. Almost every adult sperm whale carries circular scars. Some are small, roughly coin-sized, some are considerably larger. They cluster on the whale's head, throat, and sides. These are sucker scars, the prints of hooks that held on during a struggle before the squid was finally overcome and swallowed. When a squid detects a whale approaching in the darkness, something happens. Scientists believe giant squid can sense the pressure wave generated by the whale's echolocation beam, even if they cannot hear the clicks themselves. Some flee, some appear to turn and fight. A 45-foot animal with hooked suckers and a sharp, parrot-like beak is a serious opponent even for the world's largest predator. Scientists have found squid beaks with clear bite marks on them, evidence that the squid latched onto the whale's face and the whale had to bite the squid's own weapon to break the grip. They have found tentacle fragments inside whale stomachs, torn free during the struggle rather than swallowed intact. And in the stomachs of large bulls, researchers have found beaks from colossal squid, a different species that lives in Antarctic waters and can be even larger and heavier than the giant squid, with even bigger hooks on its suckers. Those beaks confirm sperm whales are hunting animals of extraordinary strength and size in complete darkness at crushing pressure. A 60-foot predator with a 17-pound brain, wrestling school bus-sized animals with hooked tentacles in total darkness 2 miles below the surface. That is an ordinary dive for a sperm whale. It comes back up. It breathes for a few minutes at the surface. It floats near its family and exchanges coders. Then it goes back down. The same animal then surfaces near a diver and causes absolutely no harm. That contrast should feel impossible by now. But one moment in history almost changed that record permanently, and it starts with a ship. Look at the skin of an adult sperm whale through a researcher's camera, and you're reading a life story written in scar tissue. The circular scars from squid suckers are obvious. They cluster on the head and snout, where the whale leads with its face during a hunt. Some are faded and old, from battles fought years or even decades ago. Some are still visible as raised rings standing out against the darker skin around them. The size of each scar ring tells scientists approximately how large the squid was that left it, because sucker diameter scales with total squid size. Some of those rings point to animals bigger than anything researchers have ever photographed alive. But squid scars are only part of the story written on the skin. Male sperm whales also carry long, thin scars from their own kind. Adult males sometimes fight each other over access to breeding areas. They use their lower jaws like rakes, dragging rows of teeth across another male's skin. The jaw-shaped scars run in parallel lines across the back and sides of older bulls. Scientists can use these marks to identify individual whales across years and decades, the same way a detective uses a fingerprint to place someone at a scene. Researchers studying a group of Caribbean sperm whales over more than a decade gave each whale a name based on its markings. One was identified by a distinctive notch in its fluke, another by a cluster of old squid scars on its left side. These details gave them identities, let scientists track life histories, alliances, and family connections over years of observation. One female the team followed for over 10 years developed new scars gradually. They watched her life accumulate on her body. A mostly smooth young adult became an elder with a visible, documented history etched into her skin. The squid scars also helped solve a specific mystery. For years, scientists trying to estimate the size of squid that sperm whales were eating had a problem. No one had filmed a live hunt at depth, so they turned to the scars as indirect evidence. Each sucker on a giant squid sits at a specific size relative to the squid's total body length. By measuring the diameter of the circular marks on whale skin, researchers could calculate the approximate size of the squid that left each one. Some measurements pointed to animals larger than anything in the scientific record. A scar on a whale's skin described a creature that no human had yet photographed alive. The whale carried the proof of its existence, and the proof was enormous. Beyond size, the location of scars revealed something about how the hunts actually played out. Most sucker marks concentrate on the whale's head and snout. That tells scientists the squid was meeting the whale face to face during the struggle. The prey was not caught from behind or grabbed by surprise. It was fighting from the front, wrapping itself around the whale's snout, trying to stop the predator that was trying to eat it. The whale usually wins. Its size and power are simply too great. But every squid fights, and every fight leaves a mark the whale carries for the rest of its life. One more substance also comes out of those deep-sea battles, something that ends up worth more than gold per ounce. And the story of how humans discovered it reveals just how strange this animal's biology truly is. There is a hypothesis in whale science that sounds like something from a comic book. A sperm whale's echolocation click, measured at its source, registers over 230 decibels. To give that number weight, a gunshot heard at close range is around 160 decibels. A rocket launch at the pad is around 180. A sperm whale click in the water close up is louder than both, considerably louder. Sound at that intensity does not just carry information, it carries energy, physical energy, enough to produce measurable effects in soft tissue. Some scientists believe that when a sperm whale closes in on prey at short range, it fires a rapid burst of extremely powerful clicks called a creak, named because when recordings are slowed down it sounds something like a door creaking at high speed. This creak happens during the final seconds of approach, right before the bite attempt. And the hypothesis is that the burst of concentrated sound at close range briefly disrupts the squid's nervous system, not kills it, stuns it, slows it just enough that the whale can close its jaw. The supporting evidence is indirect. No one has filmed a sperm whale stunning prey with sound at depth. The environment makes direct observation essentially impossible, but a few pieces of data point in that direction. Squid and fish found near active sperm whale feeding zones have occasionally appeared disoriented in ways that do not match normal exhaustion. Researchers studying dolphins, which use a related but smaller version of the same echolocation system, have found fish showing signs of acoustic disturbance after dolphin group hunts. The architecture of the sperm whale sound system adds to the argument. The clicks are not simply loud in all directions. The spermaceti organ and the fatty structure beneath it work together as a precision-focusing lens, concentrating the sound into a narrow forward beam. The acoustic energy does not scatter outward. It travels in a tight cone pointed directly at whatever the whale is tracking. At short range, the intensity in that cone would be extreme. Scientists who support the hypothesis describe it as a biological weapon, shaped by millions of years of evolutionary pressure. Giant squid are fast, strong, and equipped with hooks. Catching one reliably in complete darkness with jaws alone requires some kind of advantage. A stunning pulse of directed sound would be exactly that advantage. Scientists who are skeptical argue that direct evidence is missing, that the conditions for testing the idea are extremely difficult to create, and that a whale's size and speed might be sufficient without any acoustic assist. The debate stays open, and open debates in science tend to live near the most interesting things. What no one debates is the hunting success rate. Sperm whale stomachs are full. Adults consume around a ton of food per day. Whatever the whale is doing in the darkness 2 miles down, it works. 1,000 pounds of squid, caught in total blackness, under crushing pressure every single day. The same system that produces that hunting pulse also produces the gentle, social codas a whale exchanges with its family at the surface. The same organ, aimed differently, used for completely different purposes. That contrast between weapon and greeting will matter a great deal when we get to the Essex, because the whale that rammed the Essex was using its body in a way that had nothing to do with hunting. November 20th, 1820. The Pacific Ocean, about 1,500 miles west of the Galapagos Islands. The American whaling ship Essex was having a reasonable morning. The crew had spotted sperm whales nearby and launched 3 small hunting boats to pursue them. A few men stayed aboard the main ship. First Mate Owen Chase was one of them, supervising repairs on a damaged whale boat alongside the hull. Then something surfaced roughly 100 yards off the bow. A large sperm whale, alone. Not part of the group being actively hunted. Just there, floating at the surface, its asymmetric blowhole sending a spray of mist forward and to the left. Chase watched it. The whale held still for a moment. Then it started moving, directly toward the ship. In his written account, Chase said the whale was moving at roughly 3 miles per hour at first, the Essex barely making headway. The gap between them closed steadily. Chase ordered the helmsman to turn the ship. The Essex began to come around. The whale increased speed. The whale struck the bow of the Essex with the flat front of its enormous head. The impact shook the entire vessel violently. Men on deck were knocked completely off their feet. Chase, gripping a rail, later wrote that the collision felt like the ship had run headlong into a rock at full speed. He assumed the whale had stunned itself. He turned his attention to the damage, thinking about emergency repairs and keeping the ship afloat. Then someone shouted from the other side of the deck. The whale had turned around. It was coming back, faster this time. Chase estimated 8 miles per hour when it hit a second time, striking forward of the first impact point and driving its head through the wooden hull entirely. Water began flooding into the hold immediately. The hole was far too large to plug. The Essex went down within hours of the second impact. All 20 crew members escaped onto 3 small open boats in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Their journey toward land lasted 3 months. Food ran out within weeks. Fresh water ran out. Men began dying. The survivors resorted to cannibalism to stay alive. Only 8 men were eventually rescued. 12 were not. The incident became the most famous whale attack in recorded history. Herman Melville used it 30 years later as the foundation for Moby Dick. In that novel, the whale becomes a symbol of nature's blind, uncaring power. a force with no purpose except destruction. But in reality, the whale was an 80-ton animal operating in an ocean that, in the hours before the attack, had been turned into a hunting ground by the crew of the Essex itself. And here is the detail that reshapes everything. The Essex was not sitting peacefully in the water when it was struck. The crew had launched whaling boats into an active hunt targeting sperm whales in that same stretch of water, minutes before the attack. Those hunts were ongoing when the large bull surfaced near the ship. He had not been harpooned. He carried no wounds. But the sounds and signals of a hunt surrounded him on all sides. Was the attack a random accident? Scientists who have studied this event in close detail consistently say no. And what they found when they looked at the broader pattern changes the story entirely. A whaling ship in the 1800s was not a peaceful presence in the ocean. When a crew spotted sperm whales, they launched small wooden boats, each one carrying about 6 men and a harpoon. The harpooner would bring the boat within a few feet of the whale and drive an iron spike deep into the animal's back. The whale would run, dragging the boat behind it on a thick rope, sometimes for hours, until it exhausted itself enough for the crew to finish the hunt at close range. The process was loud, it was violent, and it happened surrounded by the rest of the whale's family. When one whale in a group was harpooned, the others heard it. They could detect the sounds of the struggle. They could sense the blood entering the water. The acoustic environment of an active whale hunt was unlike anything these animals had evolved to face. When the bull hit the Essex, the crew had already launched boats into an active hunt targeting whales in the immediate area. The large male who surfaced near the ship had not been attacked, but the situation around him was a crisis for his kind. Historians who have studied the Essex incident in detail found something significant when they looked at patterns across the entire whaling era. Sperm whale attacks on ships were not random. They almost always happened in areas where active hunting was occurring. Whales did not ram merchant ships passing through their territory. They did not attack naval vessels or fishing boats. The attacks tracked specifically to whaling ships in active hunting zones. Researchers who analysed these incidents found accounts of at least 5 other whaling vessels rammed and seriously damaged by sperm whale bulls during the same era. The victims were whaling ships, every time, in areas where hunts were underway. The pattern is clear. These were defensive responses. Large, intelligent animals encountering a specific kind of threat and targeting the source of it. And here is the biological detail that makes marine scientists take this interpretation seriously. Male sperm whales do not ram each other during competition. When bulls fight over breeding access, they use their jaws, raking teeth across skin. Head ramming has almost no parallel in normal sperm whale behaviour between members of their own species. The Essex bull was doing something outside its usual behavioural range, something specific to this situation. That requires a brain capable of assessing a new kind of threat, identifying what to target, and executing a strategy it had not used before. 2 impacts, the second faster and harder than the first. The first mate himself wrote that the whale appeared to attack with fury on the second pass. That escalation, a harder second strike, is not the behaviour of an animal that bumped the ship by accident. It is the behaviour of an animal that assessed the result of the first hit and adjusted. That is problem solving. In the middle of an ocean emergency, under enormous stress, by an animal that people in the 1800s largely viewed as a mindless fish. And what happened in the decades after the Essex only deepens the mystery. Because the wider population of sperm whales, the ones not directly involved in any single attack, began changing, together, across the entire Pacific, in a way that should have been impossible. In the early years of the Pacific whaling industry, the ships did well. Sperm whales in the Pacific had no prior experience with systematic human hunting. They were not afraid of ships. They surfaced near vessels without concern. When a whaling boat approached, many whales simply held their position long enough to be harpooned. Captains in the 1820s and 1830s described the hunting as almost straightforward. A crew with skill could expect to return to port with a full cargo. Then, within a few decades, the journal started changing. Captains were logging that the whales were different. harder to get close to, quicker to dive when a ship appeared, more likely to begin moving away before the smaller hunting boats could even be launched. The crews had not changed. The techniques had not changed. The whales had changed. And the change was happening too quickly for biology to explain it. Genetic change in a long-lived population spreads across centuries. Sperm whales live as long as 70 years. They reproduce slowly. A genetic shift in behaviour would take hundreds of years to spread through the population, but this behavioural change was spreading in decades. A research team that went back and analysed historical whaling logbooks found something specific. In the early years of Pacific whaling, hunting success was relatively consistent. Then, within roughly one generation of sustained hunting pressure, success rates dropped by around 60%. The whales were evading hunters at nearly double the rate they had before. The researchers concluded that the whales were learning. Individuals were connecting the presence of ships with danger. They were adjusting their behaviour in response, and they were transmitting that information to the whales around them through their communication system. Think about what that sequence requires. A whale observes or hears another whale being harpooned near a specific type of floating object. It connects the object with the danger. It changes its own behaviour in response. And it does so consistently enough that whales nearby adopt the same response. The behaviour spreads. Then the mothers pass it to their calves. Female sperm whales travel with their young for years. Calves watch everything the adults do. When a mother turns away from an approaching ship, the calf turns with her. It learns the signal and the response as a single unit. When that calf grows up and has its own offspring, she passes it on again. This is exactly how cultural transmission works in humans. A behaviour learned by one generation becomes standard practice for the next, without any genetic instruction required. The knowledge lives in the social group, passed from experienced individuals to younger ones through direct observation. The whales did not develop their evasion instinct through evolution. They developed it through culture, and the speed at which it spread across the Pacific population confirms that their communication system was carrying real, actionable information between individuals over wide distances. The same animals that had never seen a whaling ship became, within one generation, a population that recognised one on the horizon and knew to leave. What they could not do was escape completely, because the ships kept improving. The harpoons got longer, the boats got faster, and what humans were hunting for went far beyond oil and bone. They discovered something worth more per pound than almost anything on Earth, hiding inside a whale's gut. Something with a story strange enough to stop you completely. Here is something almost nobody knows about sperm whales. They produce inside their digestive system one of the most valuable substances on Earth. A chunk the size of a grapefruit can sell for tens of thousands of dollars. A larger piece is sold for more per pound than gold at auction. It washes up on beaches. People find it during morning walks, and it all starts with a squid beak. A sperm whale eats around a ton of squid every single day. Squid bodies break down easily in the whale's four-chambered stomach, but the beaks do not. They are hard, curved and sharp like tiny parrot beaks, and the whale's stomach cannot dissolve them no matter how long they sit there. Over time, thousands of those beaks accumulate in the lower gut, sometimes tens of thousands from years of eating. Eventually they start causing problems. The mass scratches the intestinal lining. The whale's body responds by secreting a thick, waxy substance around the build-up to protect itself from the damage. Layer by layer, over months or even years, the coating builds up around the beaks until a solid, dense lump forms deep inside the whale. That lump is ambergris. The whale eventually releases it into the ocean, either naturally through its digestive tract or when it dies and the body breaks down. Once it hits open water, a slow transformation begins. Fresh ambergris is dark, soft, and smells exactly like what it came from. But months and years at sea change everything about it. Waves work the surface, sun bakes out the volatile compounds, salt air reacts with its chemistry at a molecular level. The unpleasant smell fades entirely over time. the texture firms into something waxy and smooth, and it develops a warm, rich, complex scent that no synthetic process has fully replicated even with modern chemistry. That unique chemical behaviour made ambergris essential in luxury perfume for centuries. It acts as a fixative. When added to a perfume blend in very small amounts, it binds other scent molecules together and dramatically slows how fast they evaporate from skin. A perfume without it might last a few hours. A perfume with even a trace of ambergris can stay detectable all day. For perfumers building the most expensive products in the world, there was nothing else like it. Only about 1 in every 100 sperm whales produces it at all. Scientists are still not completely certain why some do and some do not. A large chunk that has been curing in the open ocean for several years, found washed up on a beach, can weigh several pounds and sell for sums that fund a person's life for years. People have found it on beaches in New Zealand, Scotland, Norway, the Bahamas, and along the coast of Japan, often without initially recognising what they had found. One man walking a beach in England found a large grey waxy object that looked like a dull, heavy rock. His dog investigated it aggressively and would not leave it alone. He brought it home, looked it up, and eventually sold it for a significant amount. The whale had no idea any of this was happening. Ambergris is an accidental byproduct of eating a ton of squid every day for decades. The whale produces it without choosing to, releases it without knowing its value, and never sees it again. The same whale was also carrying something far more useful to the industrial world inside its enormous skull. Something that lit up entire cities before electricity existed, and chasing it turned whaling into one of the most brutal industries in human history. Before electricity, the world ran on fire. Every lamp, every candle, every light source burned something to stay lit. Whale tallow, plant oil, animal fat. And for most of the 1800s, in homes and on streets across America and Europe, the best oil in the world came from inside a sperm whale's head. The spermaceti organ, that massive oil-filled structure in the whale's skull, held up to 500 gallons of clear, waxy liquid per animal. When whalers removed it and refined it carefully, the resulting oil burned cleaner and brighter than any other fuel then available. It produced almost no smoke. It created a clear, steady flame that did not flicker the way tallow candles did. It did not smell bad when it burned. It was the premium fuel of the industrial era. Think of it as the high-grade aviation fuel of the 17 and 1800s. Lighthouses along the entire American coastline ran on it. Street lamps in Boston and New York burned it through the night. It lubricated the gears of early factory machinery, keeping the metal from grinding itself to pieces. It went into the finest candles sold to wealthy households across Europe. The military used it as a lubricant because spermaceti oil stayed functional and stable at extreme temperatures, where every other available oil became too thick or too thin. When a whaling ship returned to port in Nantucket or New Bedford with barrels full, it carried the equivalent of months of light for an entire city. The crews were celebrated in the streets, the captains built large houses, the ships went back out as fast as they could be resupplied. At its peak in the 1850s, the American whaling fleet alone included over 700 ships. The industry employed tens of thousands of sailors, processors, barrel makers, and traders. It generated wealth equivalent to billions of dollars in today's terms and was one of the most powerful economic forces in the country. All of it ran on killing sperm whales. The whales that survived learned to avoid ships, as this story already covered earlier. But avoiding something and being safe from it are two very different things. The ships got faster. Harpoon cannons replaced the hand-thrown harpoon, giving hunters far more range and power. By the late 1800s, factory ships could locate, kill, haul up, and fully process a whale at sea within hours. The efficiency of the industry increased even as the population of whales available to hunt collapsed. The pre-whaling global population of sperm whales sat near 2 million animals. By the time the industry wound down, the number had dropped dramatically. Some regional populations declined by over 60% from pre-whaling levels. Others were hit even harder in specific decades. What ended the industry was not conservation, it was geology. In the 1860s, petroleum was struck in Pennsylvania. Kerosene, refined from crude oil, was cheaper to produce and easier to distribute than spermaceti oil. Over the following decades, kerosene lamps replaced whale oil lamps in homes and streets across America and Europe. The economic case for hunting sperm whales collapsed faster than the whale population could respond. But the damage was already done. The true scale of what was lost would take decades for scientists to even begin calculating. Because the loss was not only in numbers of animals, it was in families shattered, in cultural knowledge extinguished, in threads connecting generations that were cut and could not be retied. That scale of loss shapes everything about where the sperm whale stands today and how slowly the recovery is actually going. In 1970, the United States government made it official. Sperm whales were listed as endangered. The population had dropped so far that scientists and lawmakers agreed the species was at genuine risk of disappearing entirely. An animal that had outlasted ice ages and survived mass extinctions was now in danger because of 250 years of deliberate large-scale hunting. The pre-whaling population sat close to 2 million animals. Careful population modelling based on historical records pointed to roughly 1,900,000 sperm whales before commercial hunting began in the early 1700s. By the 1980s, when the International Whaling Commission imposed a global ban on commercial whaling, the number had collapsed to somewhere around 300,000. Counting living sperm whales is difficult because they spend most of their lives underwater across millions of square miles of deep ocean. But by any honest estimate, the decline was catastrophic. That means humans killed somewhere between 1.5 million sperm whales over roughly 2.5 centuries. To picture that number, if you drove at 60 miles per hour and counted one whale per second, it would take over 17 days to reach 1.5 million. To understand what those numbers meant for a family-based animal, each kill was not just one individual. Kill a 50-year-old female and you remove a grandmother who knew the seasonal feeding routes. Kill a nursing mother and leave her calves without care in open water. Kill an elder whose dialect connected her family to a specific clan, and sever a cultural thread that could not simply be re-established by the next generation. Female sperm whales live close to 70 years. They start having calves around age 9 and continue into their 40s. A single female can raise 8 to 10 offspring over her lifetime. Each one depends on the social group for years of care and learning before it can survive on its own. Remove the eldest females from a group, and you do not just reduce the head count, you remove the accumulated wisdom that the whole group depends on to function. Scientists who studied sperm whale populations after whaling ended found recovery happening far more slowly than anyone hoped. Other large whale species like the grey whale and the humpback bounced back relatively quickly once the hunting pressure was removed. Sperm whales did not. Researchers traced the slowness to two overlapping problems. The first was the hunting method. Whalers preferred large males, which carried more oil per animal. Targeting adult males for generations badly skewed the ratio of breeding males to females in many regional populations. Fewer breeding males meant reproduction slowed down across the group, making population growth after the ban frustratingly gradual. The second was cultural collapse. Social groups that lost their most experienced females were measurably less effective at finding food, protecting calves, and maintaining the bonds that keep a pod stable. Knowledge loss compounded population loss in ways that standard wildlife recovery math was not built to account for. Sperm whales were reduced in number. They were also reduced in cultural complexity. And rebuilding cultural complexity takes generations. The whaling ban helped enormously. Some populations are recovering, but the species is still vulnerable globally, and in some regions the situation remains fragile. The ocean those whales live in now is also not the same ocean their ancestors knew. The threats waiting inside it look very different from a harpoon, but they are still there. The word vulnerable sounds like a yellow light. Slow down a little, proceed with some extra care. For sperm whales, it is closer to a red light that not enough people have agreed to fully stop at. When conservation organisations classify a species as vulnerable, it means the population has declined far enough and the ongoing threats are serious enough that extinction within the next few generations is a real possibility if conditions do not improve. The species still exists, it is still reproducing. But the margin has narrowed in ways that make the situation genuinely fragile, especially in certain regions. Sperm whales carry that classification globally. The Mediterranean population sits at the next level up, endangered. Scientists estimate fewer than 3,000 sperm whales remain in the entire Mediterranean Sea, a body of water covering close to 1 million square miles of surface area. 3,000 animals scattered across that much ocean represents a population balanced on a narrow edge, where a bad decade of ship strikes or entanglement deaths could tip the numbers in the wrong direction. Recovery is happening, but slowly. More slowly than scientists hoped when the whaling ban took effect. The central reason is biology. Sperm whales grow and reproduce at a pace that makes fast recovery essentially impossible. A female does not have her first calf until around age 9. After that, she produces a single calf roughly every 4 to 6 years. Each calf spends 14 to 16 months developing inside the mother before it is born. After birth, it nurses for years and needs the full social support of the group for much longer before it can manage on its own. Compare that timeline to something like a white-tailed deer, which can have 2 fawns every spring starting at age 2. A deer population cut in half can rebuild in 10 years. A sperm whale population cut in half needs a very different math. Researchers studying sperm whale demographics have estimated that some heavily impacted populations may require 100 years or more to approach pre-whaling levels. Some may never fully get there, and some of what was lost cannot be rebuilt at all by any amount of time. When elder females who knew specific seasonal foraging routes were killed during the whaling era, that information left the ocean with them. Younger females had to rediscover the same routes through trial and error. That process takes longer, costs more energy, and is worse for calves who need reliable food access while their mothers are still learning to navigate effectively. Scientists comparing foraging success between sperm whale groups in regions with different levels of historical hunting found measurable differences. Groups in heavily hunted areas, where fewer experienced elders survived, performed worse at finding food during lean seasons than groups in areas that were largely left alone. The cultural deficit was visible in behaviour in ways that standard population numbers do not capture. There is another layer to the slowness that does not make it into many reports. Sperm whale societies are built around female bloodlines. Each unit is a matrilineal family. Losing the experienced females at the top of those lines does not remove a single unit from the population. It destabilises the whole structure below them. The hunting stopped. The ocean did not immediately start healing, and the whale's own biology, combined with the cultural damage, means healing takes much longer than anyone with a simple population graph would predict. And meanwhile, the threats that replaced the harpoon had already arrived and were doing their own damage quietly. Nobody is hunting sperm whales with a harpoon right now. The fleet is gone. The stations are closed. The harpoon cannons are museum pieces, but sperm whales still die from human activity every year, just differently and in ways that are harder to see. The first modern threat is ship strikes. Large cargo ships, tankers and cruise ships crossing the deep ocean travel at speeds that sperm whales cannot consistently detect and avoid in time. The vessels are enormous, sometimes longer than a football field, and the noise they generate underwater is a constant low rumble. Sperm whales navigating through a sea full of ship noise have a harder time picking out a fast-moving object approaching from a distance. A ship strike on a sperm whale is almost always fatal. The animal gets hit by the hull or dragged into the propeller. In the Mediterranean Sea, which sits beneath some of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, ship strikes are considered a primary reason the local population has failed to recover even decades after the whaling ban. The second threat is fishing gear. Sperm whales are intelligent and learned long ago that fishing lines represent an easy meal. A commercial long line deployed for tuna can stretch for miles with hundreds of baited hooks. A sperm whale that discovers one can strip it far faster than intended. This behaviour annoys fishing crews, but the real danger is not the theft. The danger is becoming entangled. Thick fishing cable wrapped around a whale's body cuts into the skin over time. It restricts movement. It can prevent the animal from diving properly or reaching the surface to breathe. Entanglement kills slowly, and investigators examining dead stranded sperm whales find signs of it with troubling frequency. The third threat is underwater noise. The ocean today is far louder than it was 200 years ago. Shipping engines, military sonar systems, underwater construction for oil platforms and wind farms, and seismic surveys used in oil exploration all produce powerful low-frequency sound. These frequencies travel far underwater and overlap directly with the ranges sperm whales use to communicate. Scientists studying sperm whale coda behaviour in noisy shipping corridors found the whales changing their patterns. They repeated codas more often. They produced louder signals. The communication was still working, but it was costing more effort and potentially carrying less precise information across the background noise. The fourth threat is plastic and ocean pollution. Autopsies of sperm whales found stranded on beaches around the world have turned up stomach contents that include plastic bags, fishing line, pieces of netting, and other debris. A whale that swallows enough plastic cannot process it. The material blocks the gut, prevents normal digestion, and can cause starvation even while the whale continues trying to eat. None of these threats produce the single dramatic moment of a harpoon strike. None of them draw the same attention, but the cumulative pressure they put on a recovering population is real and ongoing. And through all of it, the whales continue doing something that genuinely confounds researchers. They continue choosing not to retaliate against the species causing it all. What that looks like in person, in the water, face to face, is one of the strangest and most moving things in animal science. In early 2026, a research team from Project CITI was working off the coast of Dominica. They had been in the water for weeks recording codas, tagging individual whales, and filming behaviour with underwater cameras and drones flying overhead. It was careful, methodical work. Most days produced steady data and no drama. Then something happened that nobody on the team had ever seen before. A female in one of the local pods went into labour at the surface. The drone caught it from above. Other females in her group immediately surrounded her, circling tight. Sperm whale births are intense and require fast action. A newborn calf must reach the surface within minutes or it will drown. Its fins are soft. Its muscles are not yet strong enough to push it up on their own. The females in the mother's group began lifting the calf with their bodies, nudging it upward, forming a living platform underneath it. The researchers watching the drone feed had seen versions of this behaviour documented in older literature. It was rare to capture on video, but it matched what scientists expected from this species, and then something nobody expected happened. A second pod arrived. A completely separate family group, different dialect, different clan identity, no documented family relationship to the mother or the calf. They joined in. Animals from the second group swam directly into the birth formation and participated in keeping the calf at the surface. They held position alongside the mother's family. They pushed from below. For a period of several minutes, two genetically distinct groups of sperm whales worked together around a newborn that belonged to only one of them. The calf survived. It was swimming independently within hours of birth. The researchers who reviewed the footage afterward described their reaction as close to disbelief. They had read about cross-family assistance in sperm whales as a theoretical possibility. Nobody had captured it at this level of clarity on camera during an active birth. What drives that behaviour? Scientists have two main ideas, though neither is certain yet. One is that sperm whale social bonds extend further than the immediate family, in ways the research community is still mapping. Individuals from different pods do meet at sea. They exchange codas during those encounters. It is possible that relationships form over years of such meetings, creating loose social obligations that can activate in a crisis. The other idea is simpler and more unsettling. A sperm whale calf in distress produces specific acoustic signals. Those signals may trigger a response in nearby adult females that cuts across family lines entirely, something close to a biological pull toward a struggling young animal, regardless of whose calf it is. Either way, what the footage showed was unmistakable. Two families chose to work together for a stranger, in the open ocean, with no obvious benefit to the helpers. That capacity for care that extends beyond family toward strangers in an emergency is something we consider a mark of an advanced social mind. Sperm whales demonstrated it on camera, and the question it raises is the same one that sits under every chapter in this story. Why do animals this capable, this socially complex, choose to swim away from us? At some point in this story, a direct question has to be asked. Female sperm whales watched their family members get harpooned for 2 full centuries. They heard the sounds of dying whales in their own family groups. They lost mothers, sisters, daughters, and calves to ships and harpoons. Some of them were struck themselves and survived with the scars. The experience of their species with humans was 250 years of systematic, large-scale killing. And in the entire recorded history of that relationship, no female sperm whale has ever attacked a human being. Scientists who specifically searched the literature for documented cases of female sperm whale aggression toward people found essentially nothing. The incidents that exist in the historical record almost exclusively involve large adult males, like the Essex encounter, and those happened in the middle of active whaling operations. Female pods carrying nursing calves, surrounded by the noise of an attack on their kind, chose to flee rather than fight. In the modern era, female pods interact with humans constantly. Researchers swim alongside them off Dominica every year. Whale-watching boats operate in their feeding grounds across the Caribbean and the Pacific. Divers with cameras slip into the water next to nursing mothers with calves right beside them. The females watch. They click. Sometimes they come closer for a better look. Then they continue with whatever they were doing before the human arrived. One explanation scientists offer focuses on prey recognition. Female sperm whales spend their entire lives hunting squid deep in the ocean. Their hunting system is calibrated very specifically to the sounds, movements, and pressure signatures that squid produce. Humans do not produce any of those signals. We do not trigger the hunt. We are outside the system. But that explanation falls short on its own, because female sperm whales are clearly intelligent enough to recognize humans as something distinct from prey. They scan divers with echolocation. They adjust their approach based on what the human does. They communicate with their group about the encounter. They know we are there. They are not ignoring us out of ignorance. They are choosing a response. Some researchers have pointed to the social structure of female pods as part of the answer. These are cooperative groups built around calf protection and group stability. The default behavioral response to an unfamiliar presence is to assess it carefully, communicate about it, and then decide whether to leave. Conflict, even conflict the whale would easily win, carries risk to the group. Moving away is consistently the safer choice for a pod with young calves. Others have suggested something harder to measure and harder to dismiss. Something in the neighbourhood of learned tolerance. A culturally transmitted understanding within female pods that humans in the water are strange but harmless, and can be observed from a safe distance before the group moves on. That kind of transmission across generations is exactly what we now know sperm whales are capable of. They passed evasion behaviour to their calves during the whaling era. There is no scientific reason they could not pass something like a behavioural stance toward humans in general. Whatever drives it, the pattern holds. The most powerful female predators on Earth, with every reason to view humans as a threat, choose consistently to observe and leave. When you watch that choice happen in the water, up close, it is harder to explain a simple instinct than almost anything else in animal behaviour. A researcher named Hector sits at the edge of a small boat off Dominica. Below him, audible even above the surface, he can hear clicks, deep, rhythmic pulses of sound coming from somewhere under the surface. He slips into the water without splashing, slowly. The guide he is with gave him the same instruction every guide gives first-time swimmers here. Move slowly, stay calm, and let the whale decide what happens next. Do not swim toward the whale. Stay still. Let it come to you if it chooses to. For the first minute there is nothing visible, just blue water in every direction and the sound of his own breathing through the snorkel. Then, from the dark water below, something enormous rises. A female sperm whale, maybe 40 feet long, ascends from below and levels off about 30 feet away. She's facing him directly. Her eye, small relative to her body, is steady and focused. She's not moving fast. She's not charging. She's looking at him the way you look at something when you're deciding what it is. Then the clicks start. Rapid bursts of sound hit him in the chest. He feels them physically as a buzzing pressure in his sternum. The whale is echolocating him. It is seeing him through sound, building a picture of his body, his bones, the air in his lungs, the density of the wetsuit around him, all of it mapped in the first few seconds. This continues for almost 2 full minutes. The whale circles him once, slowly, covering the distance in long, unhurried sweeps of its tail. At the closest point, it comes within about 15 feet. It could cross that distance in under a second. It does not. It continues its arc, continues clicking, and then, with one slow push of its flukes, begins sinking back into the blue, gone in about 4 seconds. Encounters like this happen regularly off Dominica and in a handful of other locations where experienced guides take small groups into the water near resident sperm whale pods. The behaviour is consistent enough across many encounters that scientists have been able to study it in detail. What they find is that the whales are paying active attention. They scan divers with echolocation. They adjust their swimming path to improve the angle of approach. Calves, more curious than adults, sometimes come closer than their mothers do. Adult females will occasionally hover near a diver for an extended period before deciding to leave. Researchers who have catalogued these encounters consistently describe the whale behaviour as exploratory, interest without aggression, close attention without threat. One diver filmed an encounter where a whale held position near her at the surface for over 2 minutes, repeatedly angling its massive head toward her in a way that suggested deliberate sustained attention. She described the experience afterward as the most powerful thing that had ever happened to her underwater. The scale was overwhelming, the attention was unmistakable, and the total absence of threat was more surprising than anything else. The guides who run these expeditions have noticed something important. Divers who move toward the whale almost always cause it to move away. Divers who stay still and let the whale approach on its own terms have longer encounters. The whale is reading the human's behaviour and responding specifically to what it reads. That is not random, it is engagement, and one filmed moment captured it better than any description could. In 2024, a diver on a whale-watching trip off Dominica posted footage online that moved quickly through the marine biology community and far beyond it. The clip shows the diver floating at the surface in calm water. Below and to one side, a female sperm whale holds position in the water column. The whale is not moving away. It is not sleeping. It is producing a steady series of clicks, audible through the camera's underwater microphone. The whale holds that position, clicking without pause, for close to 2 full minutes. Researchers who analysed the footage explained what was happening. The whale was running sustained echolocation across the diver. Each burst of clicks left the whale, travelled through the water, hit the diver's body and returned as an echo. The whale processed those echoes continuously, updating a detailed acoustic map of everything in front of it. The density of tissue, the air spaces inside the lungs, the shape of the skull. At 2 minutes of sustained scanning, the whale was not doing a quick check. It was conducting something closer to a long, careful look, the kind of attention you give something that genuinely interests you. The diver later described the experience in a post that was read by a large number of people. He said the initial seconds of realizing a 40-foot animal was holding position specifically to look at him produced a feeling he struggled to name. The scale was overwhelming, the power available to the animal was obvious, and then the feeling shifted, because the whale just looked. It did not advance, it did not threaten. It looked at him with what he could only call patience, and then eventually went back to its own business. He also noted something important about what had made the encounter possible. The group's guide had told everyone to enter the water quietly and then stay still. Earlier in the trip, when another diver had moved toward a whale, it left immediately. When this diver stayed where he was and let the situation develop on the whale's terms, the whale chose to approach and stay. Scientists studying similar encounters have noted that the click patterns whales use during these diver interactions look measurably different from their hunting clicks. The rhythm is slower, the bursts are spaced further apart. The overall pattern resembles the social coders whales exchange with each other, rather than the rapid-fire sequences used during a deep-sea hunt. The same animal that uses its echolocation system as a weapon 2 miles down to locate and potentially stun prey was using a calmer version of the same system at the surface to examine a human being. One researcher who reviewed the footage pointed out something specific. Sperm whale echolocation resolves an object in detail almost instantly. The whale had all the information it needed about the diver within the first few seconds. The remaining minute and a half of sustained clicking was not about gathering more data. The whale already knew everything it needed to know, and it stayed anyway. What that staying represents in terms of the animal's inner experience is something science cannot yet answer, but the behavior itself is documented, repeatable, and consistent across hundreds of recorded encounters. And a team of scientists watching footage like this keeps asking the same question. What is the whale thinking during those 2 minutes? For the first time in history, that question might be on the verge of having an answer. In 2019, a small group of researchers from different fields sat down together with an idea most of their colleagues thought was either brilliant or reckless. What if we could actually translate what sperm whales say to each other? The team included marine biologists, linguists, computer scientists, and artificial intelligence researchers. Together they launched the Cetacean Translation Initiative, which nearly everyone now calls Project CETI. The concept was clear even if the execution was going to be enormous. Record as many sperm whale coders as possible over as many years as possible. Tag individual whales so researchers knew who was speaking and who was listening during each exchange. Build the largest dataset of non-human communication ever assembled. Then feed it into the same kind of artificial intelligence systems that had recently learned to translate between human languages without being told the grammar rules in advance. That last part was the key insight. Modern language artificial intelligence does not need someone to explain the rules. Given enough data, it finds the patterns itself. It learns structure from examples rather than from instruction. The hypothesis was that the same approach might work on sperm whale coders if the sample size was large enough. The team deployed an array of underwater microphones around the island of Dominica, where a known resident population of sperm whales lives year-round, giving researchers consistent access to the same animals over time. They designed small electronic tags that attach to whale skin via suction cups, recording sound, movement and depth for hours before releasing and floating to the surface for retrieval. They trained local scientists and assistants to work alongside them. Recording began. By 2024, the project had collected millions of individual coder recordings from a documented population of individual whales, with known family relationships and years of behavioral history. The artificial intelligence analysis began producing results. Some of what it found human researchers had suspected: individual whale signature coders, consistent pattern differences between family groups, dial ECT markers within clans. Other findings were genuinely surprising. The analysis identified internal structure within coders that had not been visible to human reviewers, combinations of click elements that appeared together more often than random chance would predict, sequences that seemed to vary not just based on content but based on who the whale was addressing. The vowel-like frequency modulations described earlier in this story emerged from this analysis. The team was careful in how they presented these findings. They did not claim to have translated a single exchange. They did not know what any specific coder meant in the way you know what a word means. What they found was structure, layers of organization inside a communication system that was more complex than expected. One linguist on the team described it as standing outside a building and seeing that it has floors, corridors, rooms, and windows arranged in a logical way, without yet knowing what any of the rooms are used for. The project is ongoing. The recording continues. The models are being refined. Researchers believe that within the next decade they may be able to identify at least the emotional register or social category of a coder exchange. A step well short of translation, but a step no one has ever taken before with any animal. What a sperm whale says during 2 minutes of sustained attention toward a human diver might eventually have an answer we can actually read. An old female sperm whale knows things that no one else does. She knows which underwater ridges concentrate squid in the deep winter months. She knows the routes between feeding areas that her mother showed her and her mother's mother showed before that. She knows the distinct click patterns that identify friendly clans and the ones that signal groups her pod keeps distance from. She knows which sounds in the open ocean mean a threat is near and which can be ignored. She has been alive for 50 or 60 years. She has raised calves and watched them raise their own, and everything she knows exists only inside her brain and in the behaviour of the animals she has taught. Scientists studying sperm whale pods over many years found a clear pattern that showed just how much those elder females matter. Groups that still had living females over the age of 40 performed significantly better at finding food during difficult seasons than groups whose oldest members were younger. The difference was large enough that researchers described elder females as essential to group survival, not just helpful to have around. Think about what that means for 250 years of hunting. Whalers did not specifically target older females, but female pods in certain regions were hunted heavily, and the eldest members of those groups were part of the population being killed. Every elder female who died took her internal library with her. Some of that library held practical knowledge, feeding routes, seasonal migration patterns, where the squid concentrate at certain times of year, knowledge that takes decades to accumulate and cannot be rebuilt quickly. Some of it held social knowledge, which families had historically helped this pod, which clans were reliable, which strangers were safe, the kind of social history that shapes every interaction the group has with the wider world around it. Younger whales in the group constantly watch the eldest females for cues. When the elder changes direction, the group follows. When the elder produces a specific coda in response to a new situation, the younger whales watch her response and store it. Her behaviour is the template through which new situations get interpreted. Scientists studying this described watching a young female in a pod observe an elder's response to a ship passing nearby, and then produce a nearly identical response herself when the same situation arose a month later. The younger whale had not been personally threatened. She had watched and learned. That is teaching. Across species, teaching without formal instruction is considered one of the strongest markers of advanced social cognition. The elder whale was not trying to teach. She was simply living her life in view of a group that was paying close attention, and the group absorbed it. The most unsettling implication of all this is what it means for the losses of the whaling era. Scientific estimates suggest some heavily hunted sperm whale populations may still be operating with a cultural deficit 2 or 3 generations after hunting ended. The knowledge threads were cut and have not been fully re-established. An elder female alive in a healthy pod today is not just an individual animal. She's a living archive of a tradition running back through time, and some archives were lost to a harpoon before anyone understood what they were holding. This is the question that sits underneath everything in this story, and nobody has a clean answer yet. What we know is solid. Sperm whales have long memories. Scientists tracking specific individuals across years have found they remember locations, other animals and past events for extended periods. The coda dialects passed down through female bloodlines carry identity information that is decades old, maybe older. The behavioural adjustments developed during the whaling era were transmitted culturally and still appear as measurable caution in some populations today. The sperm whales alive right now did not experience the whaling era directly. The last large-scale commercial whaling ended in the 1980s. Even the oldest living individuals were born into a world where the harpoon ships were already mostly gone. But some of their mothers were not. Some of their grandmothers spent years in waters where ships were actively hunting their kind. And some of those grandmothers are still alive today, carrying whatever experience shaped them. Social animals that transmit knowledge culturally carry information about the past without needing to directly experience the original event. This is something humans do in every culture on Earth, across every era of history. A person can grow up knowing that a certain behaviour is dangerous, or that a certain kind of situation demands caution, without ever having faced the original threat themselves. An elder or a parent passed that knowledge down through stories, through warnings, through modelled behaviour. The information travelled across time inside the culture. Scientists do not know whether sperm whales transmit anything specifically about humans in that way. Whether an elder female carries a behavioural stance toward human vessels that traces through the whaling era and passes it to the calves she watches over is a genuine unknown. The data needed to answer that question has not yet been gathered. It may require the kind of long-term individual tracking across multiple generations that is only now becoming technically possible. What is measurable right now is current behaviour, and the behaviour points at something consistent. Sperm whales in regions with heavy shipping and regular human presence are measurably more cautious around boats than whales in remote, low-traffic areas. They begin diving sooner when a vessel approaches. They surface at greater distances from boats. They are harder to approach for photo identification. This difference appears consistently across populations in different oceans. One explanation is real-time cultural transmission. Whales in busy areas learning from each other that certain types of vessels mean caution, passing that adjustment through the group quickly, using the same cultural transmission mechanism that spread evasion behaviour through the population during the whaling era. Another explanation is individual learning. A whale whose body carries the mark of a ship strike, or a whale that witnessed another animal get hit, changes how it behaves around vessels. The change is visible in how the whole group moves afterward. Both explanations could be true at the same time and probably are. Either way, the conclusion is clear. These animals update their behaviour based on their experience with humans. They pay attention to us. They adapt to what we do across individual lifetimes and across generations. And across all of that time, across all of that adaptation, across all of the loss, the response has been the same. Learn, adjust, move on, swim away. That consistency, from a species with every reason to respond differently, is maybe the most important fact in this entire story. The question is simple to ask. The answer keeps slipping away from science. Why does the most powerful predator on Earth, with the largest brain ever grown, whose species we nearly killed off completely, consistently swim away from us? Researchers have worked through the logical explanations carefully and honestly. First is diet. Sperm whales hunt squid and deep-sea fish. Humans do not live in that habitat. We never crossed their evolutionary path as prey. The hunting system these animals carry points downward into cold, dark water, calibrated to the specific acoustic signature of squid at depth. A human floating at the surface matches none of those signals. We're outside the hunt entirely. Second is risk management. A sperm whale is intelligent enough to weigh costs and benefits in a situation. Yes, the whale could destroy a boat with a single tail strike, but the whale also travels with calves. Conflict, even conflict the whale would dominate, introduces unpredictability and physical risk to the group. Moving away is safer for the calves. The conservative option is to leave. Third is behavioural inheritance. The populations that interact with humans most frequently are descendants of whales that learn to avoid whaling ships within one generation. The cultural default passed down through female lines may simply be, when in doubt around humans, withdraw. These explanations account for a lot. They make biological and behavioural sense, but they leave something unexplained, because the whales do not behave like animals that are simply avoiding something they do not understand. They approach divers, they scan them carefully, they adjust based on what the human does. They stay for extended periods when the human is calm. They leave when the human moves toward them. That is not blank avoidance. That is active reading of a social situation, followed by a specific response to what was read. The whale is assessing the human and making a decision based on that assessment. Some researchers have started using language around this that makes other researchers uncomfortable. Words like restraint, like tolerance, like choice. These words imply something going on inside the animal's mind that is hard to measure scientifically. But the behaviour is hard to explain any other way. An animal that can assess the behaviour of another being, predict its likely actions based on what it observes, and select a specific response from a range of available options, is doing something that goes beyond reflex. It is doing something that in humans we would call judgment. Whether sperm whales have anything resembling judgment in the way humans experience it remains genuinely unknown. The brain structure supports the possibility. The behaviour suggests something consistent with it. But science, rightfully, requires more than suggestion. What is certain is that the pattern is real and consistent. Across populations, across decades of documented encounters, across every ocean where humans and sperm whales have met, the animal swims away, every time. And the fact that it could do otherwise and has chosen not to across every documented encounter in modern history is the most extraordinary thing in this whole story. It demands a question that most wildlife documentaries never quite get around to asking. What does this say about who these animals actually are? Scientists measure animal intelligence in a few standard ways: problem solving in new situations, social complexity and role differentiation, tool use and tool teaching, self-recognition in a mirror, the speed of learning from others, the ability to pass skills across generations. Sperm whales score well on most of these categories. They solve the problem of deep-sea hunting using learned techniques passed through family groups. They live in layered social structures with distinct roles, alliances, and long-term relationships. They update their behaviour rapidly enough to adapt to a new threat within a single generation. They communicate using a system complex enough that a team of scientists and artificial intelligence researchers is still uncovering its structure after years of dedicated study. But there is a form of intelligence that almost never makes the standard list: restraint. The ability to choose not to do something you are capable of doing. To have physical power available to you, and to decide consistently and repeatedly across time and across populations not to use it. In humans, this capacity requires a great deal of effort. We build laws around it. We construct institutions to enforce it. We raise children through years of instruction and example trying to instill it. And we still fail at it constantly, as individuals and as societies. Sperm whales appear to practice it without any of that scaffolding, without written rules, without enforcement, without courts or consequences, just behaviour, transmitted through families, sustained across generations, consistent across every documented encounter with humans in modern times. A marine biologist who has spent decades studying cetacean behaviour described the restraint of sperm whales toward humans as one of the most remarkable behavioural facts she has encountered in her career. She noted that most public attention focuses on how intelligent these animals are, how large the brain is, how complex the communication system. She was more interested in what they chose to do with all of that intelligence, specifically what they chose not to do. Restraint in the presence of genuine power requires several things happening at once: an assessment of the situation in front of you, the suppression of an available response, something like a model of the other being in the encounter, an understanding of what it is and what it is likely to do, and a decision made in real time about what response serves the group best. Whether sperm whales have anything like a conscious version of that process is an open scientific question. The brain structure is present, the behavioural outcome is documented, the cultural transmission of that behavioural outcome across generations is confirmed. What goes on inside the mind of a whale during those 2 minutes of sustained attention toward a diver remains out of reach, but the pattern is clear enough to take seriously. For every story we tell about nature being red in tooth and claw, for every assumption that power in the animal world means domination and conflict, there is a 60-foot animal in the ocean consistently choosing to let us go. That choice sits alongside everything else this species demonstrates: the cultural transmission, the dialects, the family loyalty, the cross-clan cooperation, the grandmother leading her pod toward feeding grounds her own mother showed her. Sperm whales are doing something that does not fit neatly into the way we usually talk about animals, and that discomfort, that sense of something not quite fitting the categories we brought to it, might be pointing at something important. What if we have been asking the wrong question about intelligence this whole time? Humans spent a long time assuming we were the only intelligence on Earth worth paying attention to. The case seemed obvious. We had language, we had tools, we built cities, wrote books, composed music, invented mathematics. We looked at the animals around us and saw creatures operating on instinct, and we placed ourselves in a category above them, alone at the top. Then scientists started looking more carefully, and the category kept shifting. Chimpanzees passed tool-making techniques between unrelated groups across wide distances, sharing innovations the way human cultures share ideas. Elephants circled the remains of dead family members for hours, showing behaviours that looked so much like mourning that calling them anything else felt dishonest. Crows in cities remembered the faces of individual humans who had treated them badly and responded differently to those people years later. Dolphins in Brazil developed a cooperative fishing partnership with local fishermen, a behaviour that started with specific individuals and was then passed to younger dolphins who watched and joined in. Each discovery narrowed the gap between what we assumed was exclusively human and what other animals were doing. The gap shrank. The category blurred. Sperm whales sit at one end of this conversation, and they sit there in ways that are hard to set aside once you have looked at them directly. The largest brain ever evolved by any species. Family structures that function as multi-generational communities with defined roles, real relationships, and cultural continuity. Communication complex enough that artificial intelligence researchers need millions of data points to begin uncovering its structure. Cross-family cooperation during birth with strangers. Behavioural adaptation to human activity that spreads through populations within a generation. And a consistent, documented, historically stable pattern of non-violence toward the species that nearly wiped them out. Scientists studying animal cognition have started using the term other minds to describe what they're actually looking for when they study animal intelligence. The question is no longer just whether an animal can solve a puzzle or use a tool. The question is whether the animal has something going on inside it that could be called a perspective, a point of view, an experience of its own world from the inside. By that measure, the evidence for sperm whales is substantial and growing. An animal that exchanges vowel-like sounds in structured back-and-forth conversations, that passes its dialect down to grandchildren as a form of cultural identity, that cooperates with strangers during a crisis, that scans a human diver for 2 minutes with what looks remarkably like curiosity, that updates its group behaviour across generations in response to changes in what humans do. The picture that assembles from these facts is not the picture of a machine running on instinct. It is the picture of something living a full, complex life in a world we can barely access. Something that knows its ocean the way we know our cities. Something with relationships, history, and a culture that has been running in parallel with ours for millions of years, mostly in the dark 2 miles below. Something that encountered us, assessed us, and made a decision. What that decision says about the nature of mind and what it means for how we understand our own place in the story of life on this planet is still being worked out. But the shape of the question has already changed, and that changes everything. Here is where we land. The biggest predator on Earth has the largest brain in the history of life. It communicates using a system that researchers are still decoding with artificial intelligence. It passes culture across generations. It cooperates with strangers during emergencies. It has never once hunted a human being. And despite what we did to it, it swims away instead of fighting back. That is a lot to hold at once, and it asks something of us. The obvious call to action is the conservation one. Sperm whales are still listed as vulnerable globally. The Mediterranean population is endangered. Ship strikes, fishing entanglement, noise, and ocean plastic are still killing them every year. The population is recovering slowly from a 2-century catastrophe that humans created, and the cultural knowledge lost during the whaling era cannot be recovered. The elder females who died took their libraries with them. If that were the whole story, the path forward would be clear. Protect the ocean. Reduce shipping speeds in whale habitat. Require safer fishing gear. Push governments to take ocean noise seriously. Give the species room and time to rebuild. But the deeper thing this story asks of us is harder to define and harder to answer. It asks us to reconsider what intelligence looks like. We built the definition of intelligence around the things humans do well: language, tools, math, construction. And then we looked at the ocean and found a species doing something we never put on the list. A species that carries culture in its clicks, teaches calves the same way we teach children, builds social systems that scientists spend entire careers studying, and responds to the worst treatment any wild animal ever received from our species with patience and withdrawal. That is not the intelligence of a creature that scored well on our test. That is the intelligence of a creature doing something we barely understand and are only starting to measure. Project CT may give us an entry point. If that team succeeds in identifying meaning inside sperm whale coders, even at the level of emotional context or social category, it will be the first time in human history that we have genuinely listened to another species. Not just recorded, listened, with comprehension. What we might hear is impossible to predict, and that uncertainty is worth sitting with, because it means the story is not finished. We are still early in understanding what sperm whales are, what they know, and what they have chosen across all these generations. We only know that something is being said in the deep ocean, that something is happening in those long coda exchanges between family members after a dive, that something was happening during those 2 minutes of sustained echolocation aimed at a floating human diver. The animal that has never once hunted us is the same animal that has never stopped paying attention to us. Somewhere down there right now, a grandmother is leading her family toward a feeding ground her own grandmother showed her. A calf is learning its first coda. 2 whales from different families are clicking at each other at the surface after something that looked, from the drone footage above, a great deal like a conversation. And one of them surfaces, breathes, looks toward a boat in the distance. It clicks once, listens for the echo, and it swims away.